Hello students, well here we are. This is it, the last lecture of the year. So module 16 is our last module. We'll be looking at mammals, and we'll also have a fun little ending there on animal behavior, which is kind of fun, so we'll get into that. Okay, so let's get the criteria. What makes something a mammal? Here we go. Number one, they have hair covering their skin, or at least they have hair follicles. Okay, so typically you might think of some mammal that they're not very furry or hairy, but they do have follicles and skin. Sometimes it's not as obvious as other times. You know, for instance, you might think of a whale. It's a mammal. It doesn't seem to have any fur, certainly doesn't have any fur, but it does have whiskers and other things that have the hair follicles have coming out of them. So it is there, promise. Next, they reproduce with internal fertilization. They're usually viviparous. There are those weirdos, the ones that lay eggs, right? So we'll look at those too. They nourish their young with milk secreted from specialized glands. Okay, the glands are called mammary glands, and that's where the word mammal comes from. All right, so mamas have to take care of the babies by feeding them milk from mammary glands. They have a 4-chambered heart, and they're endothermic. They're warm-blooded. They're able to regulate their temperature in some way. Okay? A lot of times the fur is useful for that, right? Okay, so let's talk about their hair. Body hair in mammals is sometimes obvious, sometimes not. They all do have body hair in some way or the other. Hair is produced from follicles in the skin. Living cells near the root push dead cells up from the hair shaft, and hair functions to give warmth to the animal. It also can contribute to their camouflage, their coloring. There are some specialized hairs that do aid in nerve signals, you know, like a cat's whiskers, right? You've always heard don't ever cut a cat's whiskers. It'll kind of throw them off balance, I think literally. Some mammals used specialized hair for defense. Here we go. Boom, right there. That is an African porcupine. Okay, so there are two different kinds of porcupines, the North American porcupine and the African. So this is African. How do I know? It's because its quills look something like this. All right, they're pointed on the end. Now, the North American porcupine tends to have smaller quills, but they have a barb on the end of them. So they are hard to get out. So a lot of times if you see a picture of a dog that's got, you know, barbs all in his face, it's probably difficult to get out because it's probably a North American porcupine. We find African porcupines obviously in Africa, but at zoos and things like this. People use these quills. It's like their hair, right? That's, you can pull it out, and it hurts to pull a piece of your hair out, right? So it would hurt that way, but not terribly. They drop them all the time, like our hair falls out all the time. People use these quills for things like jewelry, you know, decor, stuff like that. I think at one point they even used them as sort of like needles. They could pull, you know, thread and through things, yeah. So, but it is very, very specialized. Oh, and real quick, they don't shoot them out. People think they shoot their quills at it. You know, you have to rub against them. When you rub against them, they'll fall out. The ones that are ready to come out, and they'll stick in your skin. All right, let's talk about reproduction. Mammals are viviparous, meaning that development occurs inside the female. They're called mostly placental mammals. A placenta is a vascular structure that provides nutrition from the mother to the baby. It results in an umbilical cord, which you are familiar with, and resulting also in a belly button. All right, so mammals end up with a belly button. Depending on the species, the gestational, that means the amount of time the babies are in the womb, it depends, right? After the birth, the newborn's nourished by its mother's milk through mammary glands. All right, so those are the points of reproduction. Remember, once again, if you need to pause it to write some things down, go for it. All right, this is a picture of the placenta. All right, it causes, it's the ability for the mother to nourish the baby. All right, so take a look here. What we've got is the umbilical cord, right? It's right here. And then this is the mother's blood coming up very, very close to the baby's blood. And then the baby's blood right here, okay? They never actually mix, and that's important to know, that they don't mix together, so the baby can have a completely different blood type than the mother. They just get very, very close so that the nutrients can pass over and the oxygen can pass over through the blood into the bloodstream of the developing embryo, the developing baby, okay? So here we're looking at like the placenta down here. It shows you how it's kind of, look at the increased surface area there. You know, that's a common theme we have found, right? And then we can see the little creature developing right there. There are three main groups of mammals we'll be looking at. We have the placental mammals. That would include us, whales, cats, dogs, pets you have at home, that kind of thing. Marsupials are unusual, right? They have development inside a pouch. The kangaroo and the koala are good examples of that. Then we have the weird ones, the monotremes. Monotreme, mono means one, and treme means whole. So it's one hole, and they lay their eggs through the hole. The platypus and 3 different types of echidna, making for 4 different types of monotremes. Okay, I think we're going to watch, we'll watch a video in a second. All right, so take a look here, the major mammalian orders. All right, we can see here, we have monotremata down here, and the marsupials. Down here, some things, Sirenia, Proboscidea, we'll be looking at some of those. Xenartha's got its own little group by itself. Lagomorphs, those are bunnies. Rodents, primates are in this group right here as well. And then we have some of our ungulates up here, and cetacea would be our whales and stuff like that. So we're going to go take a look at these guys. Let's watch a little movie to get us going.
What do these animals have in common? More than you might think. Along with over 5,000 other species, they're mammals, or members of class Mammalia. All mammals are vertebrates, meaning they have backbones. But mammals are distinguished from other vertebrates by a number of shared features. That includes warm blood, body hair or fur, the ability to breathe using lungs, and nourishing their young with milk. But despite these similarities, these creatures also have many biological differences. And one of the most remarkable is how they give birth. Let's start with the most familiar, placental mammals. This group includes humans, cats, dogs, giraffes, and even the blue whale, the biggest animal on Earth. Its placenta, a solid disc of blood-rich tissue, attaches to the wall of the uterus to support the developing embryo. The placenta is what keeps the calf alive during pregnancy. Directly connected to the mother's blood supply, it funnels nutrients and oxygen straight into the calf's body via the umbilical cord, and also exports its waste. Placental mammals can spend far longer inside the womb than other mammals. Baby blue whales, for instance, spend almost a full year inside their mother. The placenta keeps the calf alive right up until its birth, when the umbilical cord breaks and the newborn's own respiratory, circulatory, and waste disposal systems take over. Measuring about 23 feet, a newborn calf is already able to swim. It'll spend the next 6 months drinking 225 liters of its mother's thick, fatty milk per day. Meanwhile, in Australia, you can find a second type of mammal, marsupials. Marsupial babies are so tiny and delicate when they're born that they must continue developing in the mother's pouch. Take the quoll, one of the world's smallest marsupials, which weighs only 18 milligrams at birth, the equivalent of about 30 sugar grains. The kangaroo, another marsupial, gives birth to a single jelly bean-sized baby at a time. The third, and arguably strangest example of mammalian birth. There were once hundreds of monotreme species, but there are only 5 left. 4 species of echidnas and the duck-billed platypus. The name monotreme means one hole, referring to the single orifice they use for reproduction, excretion, and egg laying. Like birds, reptiles, fish, dinosaurs, and others, these species lay eggs instead of giving birth to live young. Their eggs are soft-shelled, and when their babies hatch, they suckle milk from pores on their mother's body until they're large enough to feed themselves. Despite laying eggs and other adaptations that we associate more with non-mammals, like the duck-billed platypus's webbed feet, bill, and the venomous spur males have on their feet, they are, in fact, mammals. That's because they share the defining characteristics of mammalia, and are evolutionarily linked to the rest of the class. Whether placental, marsupial, or monotreme, each of these creatures and its unique birthing methods, however bizarre, have succeeded for many millennia in bringing new life and diversity into the mammal kingdom.
Okay, there we go. Good, synthesis of all that information. All right, there is on table 16.2, you're going to find the major mammalian orders. There are some exceptions. For instance, the ones we talked about, the ones that lay eggs and the ones that have pouches, right? So those are the exceptions to the general characteristics. They do all feed their young, though, with milk, right? So the monotremes are oviparous. That means they lay an egg. They reproduction is egg laying, nursing their young. And then, what did it say, 4 different echidna? Yeah, so that's 5 total. Yeah, I forgot about one of those. The duck-billed platypus is a pretty amazing creature. A lot of young kids really enjoy learning about them. Their bill is somewhat leathery, like a shoe kind of a thing. When scientists first were brought the body of a dead platypus, they thought somebody had sewn different creatures together. They didn't think it was real. But then after some research, we found out, indeed, it is a real animal. It mostly lives in, down under, right, in Australia and New Zealand. Here's some babies. How cute is that? Look at those little babies. Remember, they hatched out of an egg. So the platypus distribution, we can see Tasmania and eastern Australia. Maybe I was wrong about New Zealand. New Zealand's just right, an island set right over here, so maybe they're there too. They do, when they swim and go look for their food, they do use a type of echolocation. They apparently, according to this right here, I think they keep their eyes closed when they're hunting, and then they just basically operate off of, sound waves, and they find the critter that they want to eat. Apparently, they might eat crabs right there. All right, so they have 440,000 receptors in the stripes of the bill, and then they can locate prey. Sort of like, remember how we talked about the shark having those little specialized cells in their snout, right? Yeah, and they can pick up those electrical signals. It's pretty efficient, actually. Here's that spur that was mentioned. The males only have this, and there is a venom in there that is used for defense and also sometimes for fighting with other males. Yeah, they will fight one another. Here's an echidna. Yeah, that's one of them. Look how spiny he is. Yeah, pretty cool. Order Marsupialia. This is also another one that young people in particularly enjoy learning about. Non-placental, they have a pouch where the young develop. We have kangaroos, koalas, possums, wombats, wallaroos. Here's a picture of generalized ones here. These ones mostly, I'm looking here, a lot of those found in Australia, of course. Yeah. There we go, popular. They're the mama with her baby in the pouch. That is called a joey, right? And they stay in there for about a year. The koala, one of the cutest animals out there. A lot of times people will call them a koala bear, but they're not. They're a marsupial, so they don't fit in that group. I will say, oh, look at how cute is that? Do I have the picture? I don't. I'm going to talk about the American marsupial. I just wanted to say the pouch that they have is actually upside down. So you're thinking, well, that seems rather, not very secure for the baby if the pouch is upside down. Well, they spend a lot of their time, my understanding is about 18 hours a day, they're sleeping anyway. But the pouch does have a circular type of a muscle that closes kind of like a pull string on a purse or a bag or something, it kind of closes like that, and the little babies are usually just fine. They don't fall out, generally. I will also say that in Australia, the biggest enemy of the koala is cars. They come out of trees, and they'll walk to another tree, and if they cross a road, they might get hit by a car. Yeah, so that's sad. This is the American marsupial. It's called a possum. Some people call it an opossum. We kind of think of them as nuisances or pests around here. Texas, we have them all over the place. You can find them. They like to get into our trash cans and eat trash and that kind of thing. That's why we're kind of creeped out by them. When they're young, this is a baby. They're pretty cute when they're young. And the mamas will carry them around on their back, and then they have a prehensile tail. They can hang from things. They do play dead. We call playing possum, where they will just freeze and they'll fall over, and they'll even exude kind of a smell that smells like rotting flesh. Yeah, so it's pretty efficient. Okay, number 3, we're looking at order Chiroptera. That's the flying mammal. They're active at night using echolocation. They're viviparous. They give live birth. Here are some common North American bats. Let's see. The Mexican free-tailed is the one that Austin is famous for. The ones coming out from under the bridge. We have some of these other smaller ones too. The cave bats. I'm trying to remember which one I saw in a cave. The Longhorn Caverns. It was really tiny, very, very small. And then, of course, there's the fruit bats. Now, we don't have those in North America as far as I know. They're mostly in tropical regions. Some people call them a flying fox, but they are bats. They do fly for real, where a flying fox is mostly gliding, right? Or, I'm sorry, like a flying squirrel, that would be. These guys eat fruit, because that's their name, the fruit bat. And then they, of course, hang upside down during the daytime hours. Let's watch a little video on their echolocation abilities.
Bats are able to catch prey and navigate in the dark by using echolocation. They emit an ultrasonic call either from their mouth or nose leaf. This call bounces off of any object in its path and comes back as an echo. Bats listen to their echoes to determine the size and texture of the object, how far away it is, and what direction the object is moving in. They also can use echolocation to communicate with other bats. Bats emit ultrasonic calls ranging in frequency from 11 kHz up to 212 kHz. Most insectivorous bats echolocate in the 20 to 60 kHz range, which is beyond what the human ear can hear. A device called a bat detector helps us to hear their echolocation by converting these ultrasonic calls into an audible frequency. Each species of bat that uses echolocation has a unique call, and this can be used to identify them. Here are a few examples.
Okay, incredible bats for sure. I think that's the same one. Pretty sure. Okay, just back to the bats for a second. I want to tell you a story that I had a bat in my house. I think we have them in our attic, which is fine because they eat mosquitoes and they're actually very beneficial that way. But you don't want to necessarily, be around them too much, right? Never touch a bat on the ground, especially during the daytime. They are, mammals. Mammals can carry rabies. Anyway, this bat was in my bedroom. I walked into my room from the hallway and I saw something move, something up in the, like near my ceiling. And I thought, well, that was weird. So I stood still, I looked, and then there was this bat. And y'all, I'm not kidding you. He flew across the room and landed like on the window curtains, and I didn't hear a thing, not a thing. It was silent, utter silence. The only way that I knew he was there was I saw him moving. Crazy, yeah. I can't really hear their chirps. Sometimes you can hear a click now and then with them, but I heard nothing when this thing was flying through my room. I'm guessing it was probably one of these guys here. So, of course, I refused to sleep in my room that night. And the next day, we were able to locate him. He actually flew to another room, and we closed the door, and I'm sure he was in there. I went to go get him out, maybe open a window, and he wasn't there. He had got out of the closed door. I don't know, crawled under the door or something during the night. I'm not sure what happened. And then I was able to get him, to coax him out the front door. So, all right. Now, I'm pretty sure that was the same video. Yeah. All right, look at this little guy, the flying lemur. This is order Dermoptera, and I don't think he talks about it in the book, but I just couldn't resist putting this picture in there. So when we have a creature like this, like a little squirrel or whatever, they're called a flying squirrel or a flying lemur. This is actually just a mammal who has those extra skin flaps between his arms, and what they can do is they can leap from a height and glide. So they're not truly flying like a bat is, okay? But sometimes they get kind of confused with them. But look, you can see why. They look a little bat-like. All right, order Carnivora, the meat eaters. They are viviparous. They're lions, dogs, cats, kind of the other animals you think of as mammals. Watch this cat. And boom. So they're pouncers. They hunt for their food, right? Cats are often obviously domesticated. So let's look at the orders in this group, okay? We're going to be looking at, oh wait, is that all we're covering, these guys? I thought we were going to talk more about carnivora. No, here we're looking at order Cetacea. These are some of our marine mammals. So we have whales, dolphins. Some of those also use echolocation very effectively. We're looking right there at a whale, right? So here are the different whales we'll be seeing. So there are two main types of whale. There are the toothed whales, and there are the baleen whales. Okay, so the baleen whales over here, the bowhead, the right, the blue whale, the biggest creature right known. Look at compared to an elephant, look how huge that is. They are huge. And interestingly, because they're baleen whales, they don't actually, they just kind of cruise through the water and collect some very small krill and other even plankton in their little brush-like mouth part, which is pretty crazy because they're huge. You know, they have to eat a lot. Then we have our toothed whales over here, dolphins and killer whales. These are all considered whales. The porpoise, but they have teeth, right? They're a little different. The narwhal is in this group because they have a mouth that opens with teeth, and they can like eat fish and stuff like that. All right, when we look at a whale, their tail, called a fluke, is very distinctive per animal. It's like a fingerprint. So people who study these guys can see a whale flap its tail up like that. Sometimes when they slap them against the wall, it's called lob-tailing. They lift them up and take a picture, and then just slow it down a little bit so they can look at it. And the whale specialist can take a look at that, and they can tell you the name of that whale. And if they don't know, then they can give them a name, right? So we see right here they have the left fluke, the right fluke, the notch, the tips, the trunk. Then they have usually colors. The last two I showed you were completely black, but sometimes they'll have a little spot, a little white, skin coloration, and even sometimes they can detect when they have like a scar or something like that. And they have a big database, and you can go check them out. Here's one of our favorite toothed whales right here, of course, the dolphin. The dolphins are great. This is a bottlenose dolphin. We have those in the Texas coast, in the Gulf waters. You can go across on the ferry and see them jump, and they'll come alongside you, very friendly. What is the difference between dolphins and porpoises, you may wonder? Okay, for one, dolphins are in warmer waters and porpoises are in cooler waters. So the long-beak common dolphin right here, the bottlenose dolphin, this is what we have in Texas, and then the harbor porpoise. Notice a very blunted nose right there, not quite as beautiful as the other dolphins. And the porpoises, like I mentioned, live in colder waters up north. All right, let's look at echolocation, kind of like how the bats were using that, right? They will send out a click. Now, mind you, the noise and the voice box of these dolphins is at the top of their head, at their blowhole, right? So if you hear them making that that kind of laughing noise, the sound is coming from here. Okay, they do move their jaws around in order to modulate the sound coming out. But the sound is originated in their larynx area, the nasal plug right here, that they make the noise, and it sends the sound through the melon. It's like a large fatty organ in the top of their head. That's why their head is bumpy like that, and it amplifies the sound and sends it out, bleep 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 bleep. The click's coming out. It hits a target, and then the target comes back. All right, the echo comes back, and it goes through the bottom jaw of the dolphin and to their brain, where they can figure out where exactly this target is, and then go eat it, right? And they can tell how big it is. They know if it's people that have jumped in the water or larger things, larger animals, sharks, they'll swim away, that kind of thing. Now the beluga whale, how fun is that? That whole melon right there is quite, large. It's large, and it allows for really great sounds to come through. In fact, the beluga whale is considered the canary of the sea, singing songs, and they say you can just hear them just singing away. A lot of times it's for mating purposes, possibly some communications, but they're very fun. If you've seen the Finding Nemo, Dory, whatever stories, and they talk about the one, who can't quite get the echoes right? He everything's kind of blurry for him. But if you punch your finger in there, it's kind of, there it is right there. See, it's very squishy. Yeah. This one's probably at a SeaWorld or something. Some of other aquatic mammals would include the Sirenia. This is a manatee. Yeah, so manatees are very slow-moving creatures. They like warmer waters, and oftentimes, like for instance, they have manatee in Florida. I was recently there, and we went to go see. There's a place where the manatee come because the water is warm. and they'll come in from the Gulf into sort of the parts. It's in the Gulf, so it's in near Tampa, Florida, and they come in because there's a power plant that's letting warm water out, as part of its waste product, and they like to come sit and have like a little warm shower. Now the day I was there, it was still wintertime, but it was very warm, and so we didn't get any manatee. We didn't get to see them because they were all still out in the sea. It was warm enough out there, yeah. But they're very cool. They move so slowly. You can see right here. They have algae that grow on their back. Yeah, they're very gentle. They don't tend to bother people. Sometimes they get hit by boat motors, and that can be how they get injured often. Okay, order Proboscidea. This would be our elephants, right? Look how beautiful. Okay, I'm not going to tell you any more about those. Okay, that proboscis, right, would refer to their trunk right here. And you think they don't look very hairy, but if you looked at a baby elephant, they're kind of furry actually. And they are related to the woolly mammoth as far as we know, yeah. But that trunk is very specified, it's very, the adaptation is quite elaborate. They can use the tip of their little trunk as fingers, right? They can pick things up as small as a little peanut or something like that. They're very, very good at that. They feed themselves with it. They wash themselves by spraying, water up onto their backs and stuff like that. Pretty cool. All right, Artiodactyla and Perissodactyla. These guys are differentiated by their toes, but they both are considered what we call ungulates. Okay, ungulates are animals that have multiple stomachs that help them digest their food. They usually will eat foods that are hard to digest, grasses and things like that. So the Perissodactyla are the odd-toed ungulates, horses. Do you know how many toes a horse has? And a zebra, as far as I know. They have one toe per foot. That's why they're so, vulnerable to breaking a leg, because they're walking around on one toe per foot. That's hard to do. Zebra as well. Rhino, I think maybe 3. It's odd-toed, Artiodactyla have the even-toed ungulates, so sheep, deer, bison, pigs, and cows. So I think sheep are 2, deer are 2. Interesting, cows. Even toes. Are they 2? I don't know. So ungulates have this specialized stomach with many chambers, and they typically will chew cud. So they'll chew the food, they'll spit it up from one stomach, and they'll chew it some more to get to the next stomach, that kind of thing. So here's two-toed. I believe that's a camel. Right, a two-toed ungulate. That foot spreads way out so they're able to walk on sand, shifting sand even. Okay, I was going to make you guess. Well, there it is. All right, next order is Rodentia. This would include the rodents. So you can see over here to the right we have gerbils, chipmunks, mice, squirrels. There's that flying squirrel, remember, just really gliding. Prairie dogs, beaver, capybara, and porcupines. So we have a porcupine in North America. We also have capybaras in South America. Yeah, very large. Beaver we have around here. Most of these we have around here. When I was a kid, we raised gerbils. But they have those specialized gnawing teeth. If you did get a chance to dissect a owl pellet, you probably had a skull with teeth like that. And if you're very careful and pull those out gently, you actually can get the whole tooth out. Look how cute. Little mice are cute. I'm not a fan of rats, but little mice, they're pretty cute. All right, now lagomorph, you would think the lagomorph were a rodent as well because they have those big gnawing teeth. But there's something different enough about this group that sends them into their own group, the bunny group, the lagomorphs, and it's this. They have an extra set of teeth behind the gnawing teeth right there. Yeah. So once we discovered that, I guess we decided to put them in their own group. So in the lagomorph group, we have hares, rabbits, and pikas. All right. So these are just the different kind of look of them. I'm not sure where pikas are found. Yeah, but they have their scientific name below them there. Look at this guy. Order Edentata. Edentata means toothless. So, do y'all know what this thing is called? Right, that's a pangolin, right? A pangolin. Unusual creature. Very, very medieval looking. But it is a mammal. Okay. Suborder Xanartha. Gotta love these guys. The sloths. So there we're looking at, can you tell if it's two-toed or a three-toed sloth? Gotta look at their arms. So we can't count those right there. We're gonna look here. I can't tell if it's two or three-toed. These guys talk about moving slowly, similar to the manatee. These guys move so slowly that they do have growths of algae in their fur and stuff like that. I was in South America and we were looking at, actually Central America, so Costa Rica. We were looking in the woods. People told us, look, there's sloths. And we're staring and staring and staring for a long time. We never saw them because they move so slowly. They're very hard to spot in their natural habitat. If you get a chance to see one, it'll probably be in some sort of zoo or animal rescue place or something like that. So the sloth is in this group, and then we have something called the pink fairy armadillo. Look how cute that is. Wow. Pink fairy armadillo. Order Tubulindata. Tubulindata. Okay, because I think that probably refers to that snout that they have. It's like a tube and a very long tongue that comes out there. So the aardvark is in here, and I assume the anteater as well. Order Insectivora. These are the ones you can tell by their name. They eat insects. Do you know what we're looking here out here? This is called the star-nosed mole. I don't know if you can tell, but he doesn't even have any eyes, as far as I know. If he does, they're very tiny and don't work very well because they live underground. They dig with those big claws, and they follow bugs around. So we can see those moles in many places. This one maybe came to the surface. You can see how wet the ground is. It may have been flooded down in his little house. This is a vole, I think. I think it's a vole. How cute, though. It apparently belongs in the order Insectivora, too. And then we have our hedgehog. Super cute. You may know somebody who had one of these as a pet. And they're adorable. They're not very cuddly because they're a little spiky. Oh, I just had to put this guy in there because I just think that's the cutest little face ever. The order Hyroscoidea, or the hyrax. It's an animal called a hyrax. I don't really know much about him except he's cool looking. All right, so we get to primates now. So primates, of course, would be the highest level, if you will, of mammals. Humans, of course, are considered to be part of this group. You can see, let's see. So we have the Old World primates and the New World. So what that means is that the ones over here, the New World ones, we didn't know anything about these till after 1492. They were here, of course, before that, before people came. But spider monkey, squirrel monkey, these they found mostly in South America and Central America. I'm trying to think if anybody in North America has natural monkeys. I don't know, not sure. But then the Old World, we have the apes and monkeys. They're broken into the two groups. The apes would be, of course, the big gorillas, chimpanzee, gibbon. Here, the monkeys, the baboon, and etc. Let's see a couple pictures here. What is an ape versus monkey? What are the differences between an ape and a monkey? So the apes have a certain amount of intelligence. Those are the ones that have been able to be taught how to use sign language, things like this. They do not have a tail. That's one of the main distinctions. Monkeys, almost all of them have tails, and those tails are useful. They're prehensile. They can hang from them. They can swing. They can grab hold of things. That kind of stuff. Not quite as elaborate as the trunk of an elephant, but they certainly can wrap onto it. You can see that one picture wrapped onto a branch there. Apes tend to have smooth, flat faces and a flat nose. You can see that in the chimpanzee right here, very flat across here. And then the monkeys have a snout that kind of pooches out just a little bit like that. Okay, and they apparently haven't been able to learn sign language. Yeah, so maybe they're working on that. I'm not sure. So you can see all the ones here. We have different the genealogies here, the different types, and you'll notice here are Old World monkeys, our New World monkeys, and their names. Some of the names we know. There's spider monkey, right? Macaques right here, the Old World, we know. And notice what comes right there. Okay, in the Hominidae, the great apes, humans are in there. Now, I would argue push back a little bit on this to say that humans are a special creation of God, but they do have things in common physiologically with the other apes, the gorillas and bonobos and chimps even for that. But much more obviously intelligent, and we do walk on two legs, and they really don't, even though they can for short periods of time. We exclusively walk on two legs once we learn to walk. Oh, look how cute. Okay, we're going to learn now it's a fun little end of year unit here talking about animal behavior and how we can predict things, we can teach them things, so let's check that out. So it's a fascinating study. Animal behavior is a response an animal makes to changes in its environment. I'm thinking that little chimp there is making fun at somebody, right? Probably has been taught that gesture to stick its tongue out at us, right? All right, so there's something called innate behavior. This describes an inherited behavior, and all of the critters in that species do that. Here we can see a bird. It's just innately understanding how to build a quite elaborate nest there. So we tend to call that instinct, right? They have an instinct. The birds just do it. Think about a bird's nest. When we talked about birds last time, nests can get really elaborate. They don't have hands to build with. I mean, they have their feet they stand on. They have their hands or wings, right? So they use their beak to do that. That's pretty, you know, pretty well done there, little bird. Oh, here's an instinct, what we call innate. That's the turtle gets born in the sand on the land and knows to go toward the ocean. I think we're still debating a little bit, what is it that gets them to go that way? We think it has to do with moon, stars, that kind of thing. The reason I say that is because people who live on the beaches where turtles hatch out have strict laws during certain times of the year. They can't have porch lights on or anything like that because the lights might confuse the critter. All right, learned behaviors, the next group we're going to be looking at here. Learned behaviors are those that are not inherited but learned through experience. We see the dog here is told to sit. You may have trained your dog to do a few things. The dogs are quite trainable. Rewards are very appreciated by them when they do something like that. Okay, so it's a learned behavior. And we're going to be looking at something here also learned in the learned group is the FAP, calling a fixed action pattern. It's it triggers, so once learned, it triggers innate behavior. It occurs in an unchangeable sequence of actions that continue uninterrupted until completed. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that we're looking at a little fish here, and this little fish will respond when it's mating time. Their belly underneath will turn red, okay? And when their belly turns red like that, they know it's mating time, and they're going to go and locate the other creatures like that. So you can see right there the redness, and I'm going to explain to you that bottom thing here in just a sec. Okay, so this guy is called the stickleback fish. Stickleback fish. He's got little stickles on his back, I guess, right? And so what happens is during mating season, like I mentioned, the male will turn red underneath. Okay, the female does not. So therefore, if the male sees another red-bellied stickleback, it'll fight it, right? Maybe with its stickles. I don't know. So if they encounter another male, they'll fight. Now, because it's a fixed action pattern, even if I put something in there with a red underside, like this little, you know, lure thing, it will fight that, okay? And furthermore, in this fixed action pattern, they tend to continue on until whatever they're trying to do has been completed. So we're going to see that in our next little video here. Hold on. This is going to be our gray lag goose, the gray lag goose who keeps her eggs safe. Let's see what she does. That's not an egg.
Shaped.
That's not an egg. That looks like an egg.
In her eyes, even a wooden cube can pass for an egg.
So that is a pretty cool deal. I will tell you this, that if you put that, you know, light bulb out there and she moves it into she starts that whole process of kind of digging and pushing her beak around, that kind of thing. Even if you took the light bulb away in the midst of that, she would finish that. In other words, she'd use her beak and she'd start moving and there'd be nothing there, but she'd still do it. That's part of the FAP. All right, our circadian rhythm, you probably heard this term before. It describes behaviors that are regularly repeated. Some rhythm patterns are seasonal, like migration. Some, you know, we look at a human there between day and night, right? We know when it's nighttime, we know when it's daytime. Our eyes are able to, you know, recognize light and dark, right? And so, in fact, we even know how many hours in the day, that kind of thing. Okay, but I don't know if you've ever been around a newborn baby, how sometimes they quote unquote get night and day mixed up, right? We got to get them on schedule so they know to sleep at nighttime so that we're all sleeping at the same time. All right, here's a migration pattern. We can see here some geese, I suspect, and they're moving and they know to go where they're going to go. They go back to generally the same place every year, right? They'll go someplace during the cold months and then they'll come back to Canada, probably the same pond that they came from, and they have that in them. They have that rhythmic pattern of behavior, right? That circadian rhythm. One of the really famous ones is the monarch butterfly. Every winter it'll fly down to Mexico, right through central Texas. In fact, I've been part of the Count the Monarchs operations before, where you see them and you start to record them on certain days, and you give that data back to the I don't know, the entomology department of Texas or whatever, or whomever, and they can record that. Okay, so but it's pretty cool. They get down all the way to Mexico and wait there and have breeding season there and stuff like that. All right, so let's talk about learned behavior now. We talked about the dog, right? We can train the dog to sit and that kind of thing. So let's look at 3 types of learned behavior. There's one called habituation, one called conditioning, and one called imprinting. So you may have heard of some or all of these, and you'll kind of know them. You'll know habituation, for instance. This is a learned behavior where animals learn not to respond to a repeated stimulus that gives little or no important for information. So we have our scarecrow, and at first they're like, oh no, and then they get used to it, right? So they know they don't have anything to worry about. I have bird feeders out, and I keep getting squirrels in my bird feeders. And for a while, I could turn on the little alarm in my house. It's like a little alarm outside, but then they realized nothing happened, and so now I have to go walk out there and throw something at them to get them out of my bird feeders. Yeah, so that's habituation. They get used to it. Imprinting, usually a irreversible type of learning limited to a specific time period. For instance, these ducklings are following their mama, right? So they have that imprinting. So we look here, they call it critical or sensitive learning period. Once the imprinting has occurred, it's usually irreversible. For instance, if a non-duck starts to follow along, the non-duck will, you've heard the story of the ugly duckling, right? Turned out to be a swan, that kind of thing. Okay. So sometimes, they'll have other ones follow them, which is good for them, good for the critter. It's able to stay protected by the mama. All right, conditioning. A certain behavior is linked to reward or punishment. We showed the dog, getting the treat and then sitting, that kind of thing. The most famous experiment using this type of practice would be Pavlov, the Russian scientist, who was able to condition a dog to start salivating to the sound of something. So we have a neutral stim. I think it was really it was a buzzer, I think is what it was. So they hear the bell every time they feed the dog. They ring the bell or push the buzzer or whatever, and he starts to salivate in anticipation of eating. Okay, and after some time of conditioning, they could just ring the buzzer or ring the bell, and they would start salivation even when food was not present. Now, you may think, oh, what a great experiment. Some people really criticize Pavlov because, in order to get good measurements as a good scientist, he had to actually put a tube in the dog's, salivary gland area to collect the saliva so he could measure it. So some people felt like that was cruel. I don't know. Sometimes animal experimentation can be very controversial, so. 2 types of conditioning for dogs. Classical, the dog hears a can opener, comes running for the food. They get used to it, right? They've been conditioned for that. But there's another type too called operant training. Here's an example. They chase a skunk and they learn, don't chase that thing. Hopefully they would learn if they chased a porcupine and got a face full of, of quills, that they could learn to not do that again. Okay, so let's watch an interesting TED Ed about conditioning.
When we think about learning, we often picture students in a classroom or lecture hall, books open on their desk, listening intently to a teacher or professor in the front of the room. But in psychology, learning means something else. To psychologists, learning is a long-term change in behavior that's based on experience. Two of the main types of learning are called classical conditioning and operant or instrumental conditioning. Let's talk about classical conditioning first. In the 1890s, a Russian physiologist named Ivan Pavlov did some really famous experiments on dogs. He showed dogs some food and rang a bell at the same time. After a while, the dogs would associate the bell with the food. They would learn that when they heard the bell, they would get fed. Eventually, just ringing the bell made the dogs salivate. They learned to expect food at the sound of a bell. You see, under normal conditions, the sight and smell of food causes a dog to salivate. We call the food an unconditioned stimulus, and we call salivation an unconditioned response. Nobody trains a dog to salivate over some steak. However, when we pair an unconditioned stimulus like food with something that was previously neutral, like the sound of a bell, that neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus. And so classical conditioning was discovered. We see how this works with animals, but how does it work with humans? In exactly the same way. Let's say that one day you go to the doctor to get a shot. She says, "Don't worry, this won't hurt a bit," and then gives you the most painful shot you've ever had. A few weeks later, you go to the dentist for a checkup. He starts to put a mirror in your mouth to examine your teeth, and he says, "Don't worry, this won't hurt a bit." Even though you know the mirror won't hurt, you jump out of the chair and run screaming from the room. When you went to get a shot, the words, "this won't hurt a bit," became a conditioned stimulus when they were paired with the pain of the shot, the unconditioned stimulus, which was followed by your conditioned response of getting the heck out of there. Classical conditioning in action. Operant conditioning explains how consequences lead to changes in voluntary behavior. So how does operant conditioning work? There are two main components in operant conditioning, reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcers make it more likely that you'll do something again, while punishers make it less likely. Reinforcement and punishment can be positive or negative, but this doesn't mean good and bad. Positive means the addition of a stimulus, like getting dessert after you finish your veggies, and negative means the removal of a stimulus, like getting a night of no homework because you did well on an exam. Let's look at an example of operant conditioning. After eating dinner with your family, you clear the table and wash the dishes. When you're done, your mom gives you a big hug and says, "Thank you for helping me." In this situation, your mom's response is positive reinforcement if it makes you more likely to repeat the operant response, which is to clear the table and wash the dishes. Operant conditioning is everywhere in our daily lives. There aren't many things we do that haven't been influenced at some point by operant conditioning. We even see operant conditioning in some extraordinary situations. One group of scientists showed the power of operant conditioning by teaching pigeons to be art connoisseurs. Using food as a positive reinforcer, scientists have taught pigeons to select paintings by Monet over those by Picasso. When showed works of other artists, scientists observed stimulus generalization, as the pigeons chose the Impressionists over the Cubists. Maybe next they'll condition the pigeons to paint their own masterpieces.
Okay, interesting. Sometimes they all kind of seem to meld together to me, the operant and the others. So, all right, social animals. These are animals that typically live in groups. They have behaviors that have some form of communication. We can see here that social behaviors can cause them to act in certain ways. Okay, so right here, our famous social animals are ants and bees, right? They live in hives and mounds, right? Wolves go in packs, antelopes in, what would that be called, herds, and whales are in pods, and they'll hang out together. They will help one another with hunting for food. They will take care of the younger creatures. The ants and bees will take care of the queen and feed her, that kind of thing. And they do. The bees have a really great, did we talk about that, about the bee communication? I think we did the wiggle dance and all that kind of thing. So fun stuff with they have, show territorial and dominance and all that kind of stuff. So read that last part of your module there. It's quite interesting, the animal behaviors. Okay, so we can see here some of those behaviors that are common: social behavior, communication, about where's food, where can we go, that kind of thing. Aggressive, this would be competition. right? I have a picture in your book, I think, of a dog, being aggressive toward, a bad guy or whatever, right? You can teach them to be guard dogs or something along those lines. Defense and dominance, marking their territory. Dominance hierarchies, they pack life, the pecking order, the alpha male versus the others. Courtship rituals for impressing a mate. Cooperation, communication, sharing resources, that kind of thing. So it gets really rather elaborate here with animals. They're quite still a lot to study there, especially in their behaviors. Okay, well, we reached the end of our study in biology. We can see the beauty that our creator has made with his creative design. I hope you had an enjoyable year learning about all these living things. I am, of course, a big fan of life sciences in general, but biology in particular. So, have a great summer, and I hope that this has blessed you.